ось вечірній Київ. Понеділок, вечір. Ви знаєте, ми звикли говорити понеділок – день важкий. В країні війна, тож кожен день понеділок.
For weeks, Volodymyr Zelensky has been leading from the front as Ukraine resists Russia's invasion. Comforting the war's many victims, berating Ukraine's enemies, and demanding more from her allies.
Ми чекаємо рішення, очищення неба, або силою, яка у вас є, або ви дасте нам бойові літаки і засоби протиповітряної оборони, які дадуть нам потрібну силу.
A war that was supposed to last days has now lasted months. Russia's advance has stalled, and in places it's been pushed back. President Zelensky is now lauded as the man of this moment.
I think your leadership has been extraordinary.
But it wasn't always like this. Before the Russian attack, questions were being asked as to whether Zelensky, a former comedian, really had what it takes to lead Ukraine.
In 2019, I was very sad. It was like a tragedy, knowing that Zelensky could become a president of Ukraine.
I wouldn't say he had policies, he had directions that he wanted to go in. But how to do that, I think he was really trying to learn on the job.
Hi, Jonah. Hi. Nice to meet you. I first met Volodymyr Zelensky in January of 2019. He was just a comedian and an actor, a jokey, fun guy, a celebrity, of course, and a real star here in Ukraine. It was the start of his political journey, and for me, as the BBC's correspondent here in Ukraine, a fascinating time. I've had a front row seat as Zelensky has gone from a political novice to leading Ukraine's fight for survival against Russia. Happy birthday, Oscar.
Thank you.
Do you know we're almost the same age? I'm about to be 41 as well.
Тоже ему 41 скоро.
Unfortunately, I'm not ready for president.
Who knows? Nobody knows.
The 25th of January 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky turns 41. It's also the birthday of one of the most extraordinary stories in modern politics. In the centre of Kiev, Ukraine's most famous comedian and actor is signing papers to officially become a candidate for president. None of us in the press pack outside are quite sure whether we're part of a joke that we've not been let into, or whether it's something more sincere.
Люди зрозуміють, що все-таки це була не якась там реклама, що я людина слова, якщо я вирішив, я це роблю, це не фейк, і я дуже серйозно.
As it turns out, for perhaps the first time in his life, Zelensky was being serious. But asked to spell out his policies, it all seemed a bit vague. On Ukraine's existential issue, Russia, for example, he seemed to think that foreign investors might deter an attack.
Это будет сильная защита. Никакие русские, никто на нас не нападет, как только у нас тут будут еще сильные иностранные компании, которые будут защищать вместе с нами нашу территорию.
The campaign was now on, but Zelensky was still making TV shows.
Или теперь весь юмор будет про меня?
Про вас.
What's going on?
We were invited back to the offices of his production company, Kvartal 95, for a look behind the scenes.
This is where you plan
your comedy shows?
Yes. Not only comedy shows. Everything on TV. We have documentary, dramas, movies. We have two big satire shows, political satire. The first stage, when we create the ideas. The guys are sitting here. They're the chiefs of different groups. So we have many script writers, different humor. They speak about the ideas, and I'm the decision maker.
So you're deciding whether their ideas are
Yes.
funny or not?
Yes. Our audience, especially TV audience, yes, it's a little bit older than, for example, movie audience is in feature films.
So what sort of humour do people like here? If you were to compare it to like British humour,
We love British humor. But for example, if сравнить, порівняти, if compared in Britain, if compared, our people, they more understand, for example, Mr. Bean or Benny Hill.
Benny Hill?
Hill, yes.
Really? So you're looking for sort of Benny Hill, Mr. Bean type jokes?
Yes.
Rather than the more kind of surreal Monty Python stuff?
Yeah.
For almost 25 years, I only thought about him as a comedian, professional comedian, a good one, quite popular in Ukraine, but nothing more.
Yerema Duch is a political consultant and used to work for Zelensky's predecessor as president, Petro Poroshenko.
In Ukrainian entertainment business, Volodymyr Zelensky was a huge star. I think he had like 95% plus of recognition among average Ukrainians. So I would say that everybody knew him.
Всем привет, дорогие друзья! Я Владимир Зеленский. Я подарил свой голос потрясающему, харизматичному, доброму медвежонку Паттингтону.
A big star, but unashamedly populist too, and very much not to the taste of Yaroslav Hrytsak, a historian at Lviv's Catholic University.
I would say that most intellectuals would not hear or listen to him that much. It was much broader public.
It's got what kind of smutty jokes?
Some of them very smarty, and some of them even say you wouldn't show you to your kids under 18, so to say. But the most recognizable when he was nude playing on the piano, and you could imagine this was part of his body. He covered a very wide spectrum, so to say. But the point is that some of the jokes were extremely crude.
Crude.
Yeah. And therefore his enemies, his opponents, they used to show this clip as a proof that he is not capable to do any kind of political activities.
Zelensky's movies and sketch shows made him famous, but one role more than any other paved the way for his presidential run.
He made a TV sitcom where his hero was a simple young teacher of history who was sick and tired of the politics, and he decided to go to power, and he became a president. So before he became a real president, he was president on TV, and people liked this image very much.
Василий Петрович Голобородько?
Да.
Доброе утро, господин президент.
Где это вообще видно, чтобы слуги...
Vasily Goloborodko, the character Zelensky played, was everything that Ukraine's real presidents hadn't been up to that point.
Вместо того, чтобы служить народу, вы прислуживаете олигархам.
Taras Stadnitsky is a peer of Zelensky from Ukraine's comedy circuit.
Дивлячись на сам серіал, люди дехто бачив, а дехто хотів бачити от саме такого президента, молодого, некорумпованого, того, який би зміг кардинально змінити.
When I interviewed Zelensky in 2019, he accepted some might vote for him in the hope of getting the fictional president.
Первая причина, конечно же, они хотели бы видеть в президентах такого человека, как Василий Голобородько, с такими, самое главное, моральными ценностями. Второе, конечно же, это ответ всему политическому истеблишменту. Люди хотят что-то новое, люди хотят ощущения, люди хотят получить, наконец-то, человека, которого имеет человеческое лицо, а не просто пластилиновое, в зависимости от того, какие ему вопросы задают и какие причины, и какие решения, и какие задачи он сам перед собой поставил.
With the benefit of hindsight, there are those who now wonder whether the Servant of the People TV show was created with a real presidential run in mind.
Я не знаю, чи ми будемо знати хоча б колись, чи була на самому початку орієнтований на те, щоб Зеленський став президентом, чи вже в самому процесі от того, як люди дивилися, як в людей зростала довіра до цього персонажа, чи вже в цьому процесі в Володимира Олександровича з'явився такий план. Ну, це, мені особисто це дуже цікаво.
Zelensky's political party is called Servant of the People, just like the TV show, and Olena Shuliak is the head of it. When she first entered politics, she tells me she hastily watched the series for research purposes.
Я, мабуть, перший раз передивилася серіал відомий, який називається «Слуга народу», для того, щоб розуміти, можливо, більше цю людину, тому що ми раніше не були знайомі.
Are there many similarities between the real President Zelensky and the TV president?
Я думаю, що спільне те, що і Голобородько, і Володимир Зеленський, вони змінювали існуючі правила, вони будували країну своєї мрії, і вони максимально йшли до тої мети, яку за собі поставили.
Извините, ребята, как говорится, нету камер.
Zelensky's sketch shows, broadcast in prime time, lampooned Ukraine's political class, like his predecessor, President Poroshenko, who owed his fortune to a sweet shop chain.
Скажи, будь ласка, вы за кого будете голосовать? Просто интересно, а мне как Петру Алексеевичу. Не зря я конфетки тут рассыпала. За кого? Ще не вирішила? Отдай конфету.
With Zelensky having jumped in the political deep end, the election campaign was unlike anything Ukraine had seen before. Zelensky held no rallies, and his message was entirely communicated through slick videos of him working out and hanging out. It all felt like an extension of his TV shows.
It was quite surprising that the man who's on the stage feels like at home, he hardly campaigned. He gave no interviews. It was super hard to see him on some public rallies. He only shoot videos, posted it online, and the rest, it was the work of his team.
The less he did, the more popular he became. And when the time came to vote, Zelensky was odds-on favourite.
Hi,
how are you doing? Are you ready to be president?
I don't know. The people will decide it in the evening. I'm ready.
That night, Ukraine's political earthquake was confirmed. Zelensky had won with 73% of the vote.
So there we have it. Fact will follow fiction. Ukraine's television president is now going to become this country's real president. Incredible.
I think that President Poroshenko team expected to see some other old politicians who they were familiar with, but to be defeated by the guy who literally were like joking about you a year before, that's unbearable.
For reformers like Hannah Hopko, the triumph of a completely unknown quantity like Zelensky was hard to comprehend.
In 2019, I was very sad. It was like a tragedy, knowing that Zelensky could become a president of Ukraine, country which face Russian ongoing aggression. So I was really afraid, chairing the Foreign Affairs Committee, having access to classified information, and just understanding that Zelensky could become a president of Ukraine. But then I met my spiritual friends, and they told me, like, Hannah, please, let's trust God. Because I trust God that He has a special purpose for Ukraine in the 21st century. So let's see.
In his speech to Parliament, immediately after having been sworn in, Zelensky focused on what had been his #1 election promise: to end the war with Russian-backed forces in eastern Ukraine.
Запевнити, задля того, щоб наші герої більше не гинули, я готовий на все. І я точно не боюсь приймати складні рішення. Я готовий втрачати свою популярність, свої рейтинги. І якщо буде треба, я без вагань готовий втратити свою посаду, щоб тільки настав мир. Не втрачаючи наші території.
He basically believed, and I believe, he really believed that the war is going on because of Poroshenko, because Poroshenko doesn't want to finish the war, because this Poroshenko, since he corrupted, the corruption is Under the war creates a very profitable conditions for corruption, so to say. And therefore this applied again. He didn't really see that the real cause of the problem is not Poroshenko, but Putin.
There were some early signs that this new approach might bear fruit. A prisoner exchange took place, with Zelensky on hand at the airport to welcome the captives home.
We have to do all the steps to finish this horrible war.
But do you think this is a new chapter in relations between Russia and Ukraine?
I think this is the first chapter.
Kurt Volker was an American envoy to Ukraine, and I travelled with him to the conflict zone in 2018. He says that in Zelensky's first few months in power, he believed he could do a deal with Russia's president.
I remember even in our first meeting saying that I understand you want peace, but Putin doesn't want peace, that this is what he wants to do. He's attacking Ukraine on purpose. It's not for lack of some formula. He's doing it because he's trying to weaken Ukraine. And I think he was initially skeptical of that, but I think as he tried to talk with Putin, he tried to do a couple of prisoner exchanges, I think he came to the view that actually Putin is fighting a war that he wants to fight.
Later that year, the only meeting between Zelensky and President Putin took place in Paris, with the leaders of France and Germany acting as chaperones. But the talks were frosty and went nowhere. Paris was the end point for Zelensky's attempts to strike a deal. Until this war broke out, Zelensky's time as president was showing some signs of fizzling out. He'd promised a lot and, perhaps understandably, was struggling to deliver on it. His once sky-high ratings in the opinion polls were starting to fall. Close allies from the election campaign, Zelensky called them his dream team, turned on him within a year.
Comedian brought incompetent people who now run major government institutions or misrun major government institutions. Therefore, you cannot achieve results. That's it.
So the optimism, the hope of change that
The hope of
existed a
change-
year ago, that's over.
I would say that many things are over. For example, promises, by the way, another one promises of his was fighting with oligarchs. It's over. I think reforms, I think window of opportunity is closed.
Ruslan Ryabashabka was sacked as Attorney General after just 7 months. He says for pushing too hard to tackle corruption and the powerful oligarchs.
Or perhaps he became tired with all this reform and he decided to be in more comfortable situation without any bad news, any bad discussions with so-called with reformers, and he chose another options to be in warm bath.
Effectively, you're saying he chose the side of the oligarchs over the side of the reformers.
Yeah, absolutely, it looks like that.
Eventually, Zelensky did try and take some targeted measures against particular oligarchs, but his critics saw it as too little too late.
Zelensky was too timid. Then he passed this anti-oligarch law that targeted individuals rather than changing the structure of the system. And that was perceived then as unfair by many of them. And so it never really got off the ground.
On the international stage, Zelensky had to learn fast. He found himself caught up in Donald Trump's attempts to use American military aid to get Ukraine to investigate his rival, Joe Biden.
For Zelensky, it was important to generate more support for Ukraine and not to be a part of domestic political games. So, of course, lack of experience could create some problems at that time, but this is how he learned what international policy is and how not to be in the trap, how to diplomatically present Ukraine, but not to be used for the interest of somebody.
With rumours of impeachment hearings mounting, Zelensky met Trump in New York. His acting skills for once deserted him.
Because of the dynamic in the United States, President Trump kept the meeting going in front of the cameras for about 45 minutes or so. So very difficult to have a serious conversation between two leaders of countries when you're doing so much of it in front of the media. I think Zelensky handled it well, and I think was just saying, okay, we got to get through this period, and then let's see if we can then resume a normal relationship again.
Then on February the 24th, everything changed with the start of the Russian invasion. A man who turned to politics just 3 years before was now facing down the world's second most powerful army.
Всім добрий вечір. Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут. Всі ми тут, наші військові тут, громадяни суспільства тут, всі ми тут. Захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде і далі.
А я думаю, що він навіть не розглядав рішення покидати Україну. Він спочатку вирішив, що він буде в Києві, він буде там, де потрібен президент. І я впевнена на 100%, що іншого рішення він для себе навіть не розглядав і не ухвалював.
This war has brought out the very best in Vladimir Zelensky, whereas President Putin has come across as aloof and distant. Zelensky has seemed very much relatable and down to earth, staying with his people in Kiev and staying in touch with video messages. The updates delivered straight to social media have enabled Zelensky to speak directly to Ukrainians and people around the world.
Звертаюсь до усіх українців всюди, де ми є. Робіть усе для захисту нашої держави. Просто вторгнення Росії в Україну – це початок війни проти Європи.
At times, the news has been almost unspeakably bleak. Through it all, Zelensky has sought to raise spirits and to inspire hope.
Вперед, з кожним днем нашого захисту ми наближаємо такий потрібний нам мир. Наближаємо перемогу, бо у цій війні просто не можна без перемоги. А так воно і буде.
You have a young, smart, charismatic personalities who deliver very simple messages, who basically tell you the truth, and then you see Putin, who is aging, who is hiding somewhere, has this long table, and nobody knows what they're really thinking.
Russian TV and the Kremlin have resorted to hurling unsubstantiated insults towards Kiev.
Берите власть в свои руки. Похоже, нам с вами будет легче договориться, чем с этой шайкой наркоманов и неонацистов, которая засела в Киеве.
Зеленский забывал вопросы, не мог договорить фразы, странно на все реагировал. В измененном состоянии или просто устал, никто не понимал. Но главный вопрос...
Киевский режим контролируется Вашингтоном и его союзниками, которые толкают президента Зеленского на продолжение боевых действий.
This guy has a nerve. I mean Zelensky. He has a balls. Because the thing is, the first days, it was disaster, it was a stress, it was depression. And quite of a sudden we see somebody who behaved very different. And he's the president of your country. And this works immensely on Ukrainians.
Before this war, Zelensky struggled to get invites to Western capitals. Now barely a day passes without him addressing a parliament or international organisation. The message follows a set path, showing the full horrors of Russia's war on Ukraine, and then demanding that the outside world do more to equip his country to resist.
Я думаю, що зараз Зеленський, той, за яким спостерігає весь світ, це людина, але його акторське минуле допомагає правильно донести до людей світу ті думки, які він хоче донести.
Everybody saw the picture of Zelensky in Bucha. And can you imagine such a picture of Putin? Never. Zelensky often visits hospitals to see wounded soldiers. He is also visiting Ukrainian families You can get access to President Zelensky. You could see him everywhere.
The first chapters of the Zelensky story are far-fetched. A comedian and TV president leading a country at war. Russia's size and might mean the odds are still stacked against Ukraine. But given what's happened to Vladimir Zelensky so far, anything is possible.
52-й день. Що можу сказати? Ми міцні, працюємо. Любимо. Дякуємо. Пишаємось. І всіх переможемо.